The night the room would never forget every year, the Visionary Voices Gala gathered the sharpest minds and loudest influencers under one golden roof. It wasn't just an event. It was a stage where history's next chapter was whispered into being, where names were elevated into legacy. The room shimmered with status. Applause came easy and assumptions came quicker. The crowd had come for one thing above all: a keynote speech from a woman whose story had inspired millions across screens and boardrooms alike. But what they didn't know was that before she ever reached that stage, the night's most unforgettable lesson wouldn't come from her prepared speech. It would come from the way she entered the room. And as fate would have it, by the time her story ended, it would flow perfectly poetically into the very first keynote of the night. The Visionary Voices Gala sets the stage for an exclusive, high-profile event. The story began with glitz, but it would soon dive into silence, truth, and transformation. A night of elegance and influence, the city skyline shimmered as twilight fell over downtown Atlanta. Beneath the glittering towers, the Marriott Grand Ballroom had been transformed into a palace of prestige. Luxury vehicles, polished to perfection, lined up along the red carpet. Cameras flashed like starlight as celebrities, CEO, and cultural leaders posed in tailored tuxedos and sweeping gowns. Tonight was not just any gala. It was the Visionary Voices Gala, a coveted invitation, only event honoring pioneers in leadership, innovation, and justice. Inside, everything gleamed. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in a golden glow. Waiters moved like dancers, balancing trays of hors d'oeuvres. A jazz quartet played softly near the velvet stage where a single spotlight waited to illuminate the podium. 1,000 hushed conversations filled the air, deals being whispered, alliances being brokered, and reputations being weighed. This was a room where power wore perfume and legacy wore cufflinks. But amid all the glamour, no one expected the most powerful presence of the night to arrive quietly. No entourage, no designer label shout-outs, no fanfare, and certainly no one imagined she'd be stopped at the door. The woman they didn't see coming, the black sedan, rolled to a gentle stop near the side of the red carpet. It didn't roar like a sports car or shimmer like a limousine. It was understated, clean, classic, and without a hint of ego. The driver stepped out and opened the back door with respectful precision. From the car emerged a woman. She stood tall, poised, and elegant in a cobalt blue gown that flowed like midnight silk. There were no flashy jewels, no over-the-top accessories. Her confidence didn't need them. Her hair was braided neatly, her makeup minimal. She carried only a simple leather portfolio tucked close to her side. To those truly observant, she exuded power, the quiet kind, the kind you don't see coming until it's speaking on stage or signing a multi-million-dollar policy. But to Security Officer Granger, she didn't fit the image. As she approached the entrance, her heels barely clicking against the marble floor, Granger stepped forward. He didn't smile. He didn't ask for her name. Instead, his arm lifted like a gate. "This entrance is for VIP only," he said, voice firm, eyes narrowing slightly. She smiled politely, her voice calm. "I believe I'm on the list, Dr. Aaliyah." He cut her off. "You'll need to use the service entrance, ma'am. This line's for invited guests only." She blinked once, the smile not fading but shifting, just slightly. "I am an invited guest," she replied, her tone still gracious. "In fact, please, ma'am," Granger said again, this time firmer, "don't hold up the line." Behind her, more guests arrived. Cameras flashed. Greetings echoed. No one noticed the woman now standing awkwardly near the velvet rope, fingers wrapped tightly around her portfolio. And no one knew that the keynote speaker of the entire evening was being blocked from entering her own stage. Not yet. Judgment at the velvet rope. Security Officer Granger stood like a wall. Broad, shouldered, and stern-faced, he'd been trained to control crowds, spot threats, and most importantly, guard the exclusivity of the VIP space. But what he hadn't been trained for was recognizing unseen greatness. The woman in the cobalt gown didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. Her grace was unsettling to him. Too calm, too certain, that made him all the more skeptical. VIP usually arrived loud with entourage and ego. But she came alone, no flashy jewelry, no recognizable face. Granger looked past her at the growing line of elite guests. "Look, I'm not trying to be rude," he muttered, scanning the area instead of her eyes, "but we've got protocols. I can't just let anyone walk in." She opened her mouth to speak again. He waved her off. "Please step aside, use the service entrance." And just like that, with a flick of prejudice and a badge of authority, she was dismissed. A quiet storm gathers. She stepped back, not out of defeat, but deliberation. Her eyes, calm as still water, now held something deeper, disappointment and resolve. A few feet away, two event interns stood frozen. One nudged the other. "That's her. That's Dr. Monroe. I saw her TD talk." The other whispered nervously, "Then why isn't she going in?" Fear kept their feet planted. Rank kept their mouths shut. A moment passed, then another. The woman in blue turned without a word and began walking toward the service corridor, her heels tapping rhythmically, a quiet storm making its way through the shadows. Back at the red carpet, Granger straightened his tie and resumed his post. He just sent someone away, confident in his decision. To him, it was nothing more than a quick judgment call, but what he didn't realize, what he'd only understand too late, was that he hadn't just turned away a guest. He'd turned away the voice of the night. Eyes that saw, mouths that stayed shut, the gala glittered on, oblivious to the quiet wrong unfolding outside. Inside, laughter rose with the jazz, and champagne flutes clinked like wind chimes. But at the edge of it all, two interns lingered by the curtain, their smiles forced. "I'm telling you," whispered the taller one, eyes wide. "That was her, Dr. Aaliyah Monroe, the keynote speaker." The shorter intern swallowed hard. "Then why didn't security let her in?" "Because he didn't know," came the hushed reply. "Because she didn't look like what he expected." Their eyes darted toward the side entrance she'd been forced to use. Regret rippled through them, but neither moved. Their titles were small, their paychecks smaller, and courage was a currency they hadn't yet earned. Silence won again. The storm had passed them, quietly. And they'd let it. Missing in spotlight backstage, a soft panic was brewing. The event coordinator, Marla, clutched her clipboard like a lifeline. She paced in heels too high for comfort, whispering into her headset, "Has anyone seen Dr. Monroe? We're minutes from her intro. She was supposed to be here 30 minutes ago." The stage assistant shrugged. Texts went unanswered. The screen behind the podium displayed her name in bold letters, glowing like a promise the room couldn't yet keep. Meanwhile, inside the ballroom, the MC adjusted his cufflinks and stepped into the spotlight with a rehearsed smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began confidently, "tonight's keynote speaker is a woman whose journey has broken barriers, redefined leadership, and—" He paused. The voice in his earpiece was trembling now. "She's not here." He blinked, throat dry. "Will be joining us shortly." The applause was polite, but behind it, curiosity stirred. Where was the woman they'd all come to hear, and why hadn't anyone seen her enter? The name that shattered the silence. Granger stood at his post, posture straight, scanning faces with robotic repetition. Nothing unusual, nothing out of place. Then from inside the ballroom, a name echoed through the speakers. Dr. Aaliyah Monroe. The voice was confident, expecting a grand entrance. Instead, a pause followed. Then an awkward shuffle of words. The audience shifted in their seats. Granger blinked. That name. He replayed the last 30 minutes in his head. The woman in the blue dress, the calm voice, the leather portfolio. His blood ran cold. "Oh no," he muttered, heart-pounding. He turned toward the side entrance, eyes searching the shadows. He hadn't turned away a guest. He hadn't turned away just anyone. He had turned away the reason for the entire evening. And the realization hit like a brick to the chest. He quiet returned. The side door creaked open. There she was, Dr. Aaliyah Monroe, gliding down the side aisle, escorted now by two flustered interns and one pale-faced coordinator. She didn't storm, she didn't rage. Her presence was louder than anger, stronger than pride. She walked with the unbothered grace of someone who had earned every room she entered. Heads turned, conversations halted. Faces flushed. Granger saw her approach. He stiffened, his mouth opened, but no words came. She passed him like a wave over stone, not out of spite, but power. She didn't need to say a word. She belonged. And everyone now knew it. She climbed the steps to the stage, she stood at the podium, and for the first time all night, the room fell completely silent. A story before the speech, the stage lights kissed her face as she stepped to the mic. Aaliyah paused, letting the silence settle. She could feel the weight of every gaze in the room, and then, calmly, clearly, she began, "Before I speak tonight about leadership and equity, I'd like to share a personal story from just moments ago." A few shifted in their seats. "I arrived early, ready to inspire this incredible gathering, but I was stopped. Not because I lacked credentials, not because I was late, but because someone at the door couldn't imagine that someone who looked like me was meant to stand on this stage." Gasps rippled softly through the room. "I wasn't angry," she continued. "I was reminded that change isn't something we clap for, it's something we live through, sometimes painfully." You could hear a pin drop, and somewhere in the back, Granger felt his knees weaken beneath his polished stance. The message that moved the room. Aaliyah straightened her back and lifted her portfolio, revealing it briefly under the light, embossed with gold, Doctor of Philosophy, Harvard Business School. "I didn't come here for sympathy," she said. "I came here with solutions, for boardrooms, for communities, for minds still trapped behind velvet ropes of assumption." Her voice deepened, resolute. "Real leadership doesn't come from titles or gowns or galas. It comes from knowing who you are when no one else does." The crowd erupted, not in polite applause, but a standing ovation, not because of her degrees, not even because of her story, but because truth had just spoken, and it had struck every soul in that room. Aaliyah stepped back from the podium as the applause thundered, and in the back corner, the man who had once blocked her path quietly lowered his eyes. Velvet ropes and unshakable voices. When the applause faded and the crowd sat back down, the mood in the ballroom had shifted. Not just out of guilt, not just out of shock, but out of realization. Perception had been challenged, power had changed form. Dr. Aaliyah Monroe hadn't stormed in demanding justice. She hadn't scolded or shamed. She had done something far more powerful. She had led by example. Her grace had exposed the quiet prejudice still living in the shadows of privilege. Her story had revealed the difference between inclusion on paper and belonging in reality. As she exited the stage, people didn't rush her with handshakes. They stood in awe, not because she had a doctorate, not because she delivered a perfect speech, but because she had walked through the fire of disrespect and lit the room with it. The velvet rope hadn't just blocked a woman that night. It had tried to block a message, and the message came through louder than ever.